it's not about like I've been there, but I've done that. No, I've barely scraped away from it being just about human. The toxicity that you're around when you're on the front lines and one side is shouting to the other side and the gas. And if you can just come away from that feeling a little human, then then you're lucky.
Welcome. What up? To the Habits of the Few.
What we got for 'em?
Where we discuss habits, rituals, and mindset tactics that you can use to reach your version of success. Yeah. And now, here's your host, 𝙗𝙗𝙗𝙗𝙗𝙗.
There was really no plan. I didn't take it as an opportunity to do one thing or another. I just saw the third precinct burning in Minneapolis, and there was a power there, whether you're on the left or the right or wherever you are on the political spectrum, like the power of the people versus the government kind of thing, your cookie cutter, whatever it is. And I'm a filmmaker and I'm a documentarian, and if I wasn't down there, then what's the point? So I actually went down that on, I think, the second day of the Portland protests. And I was really pissed off about the fact that nobody else wanted to go. I asked my friend, I asked a couple of the people from the Portland film community, and nobody wanted to go. And so I actually went down and I came back to my house again, and I sat in the parking lot for a minute, and then I went back because I knew I had to do it, and I wanted the safety of having somebody around me, and I didn't. And after that day, we didn't stop. I met Eric and I met my producer as well, and we filmed a lot, and we've gone through a lot, I think, physically and mentally and spiritually.
Yeah, it seems like there's been quite the roller coaster of perspective, and being able to see things from a wide array of angles, which I think most people tend to have, myself included, tend to be looking at things from one particular lens, right?
Well, the thing is, that is not a bad thing necessarily. That's just the human thing to do. What I mean by that is facts for regular people come from a reputable source, right? Those are facts that somebody else has gathered, but they're not really your facts. And that's okay, because we have to live our own lives, and we have to work and take care of our kids and all that stuff. So when it really does matter is when the facts we think are facts affect other people, right? Because of what we think. And then you have to do the due diligence of figuring out if what we believe is right and the way we act is actually the right thing, because it affects your surrounding. And that's the case in the world today, where people believe one thing or another to be a fact, and then a whole bunch of other people are affected by it, their actions.
Yeah, and that's the sad thing about it all. I'd have to agree, is that we tend to overlook that, because we're all entitled to our opinion, right? Like, what I believe in, my faith, my cultural background, the bubble that I grew up in, right? The circle that was designed around my morals and my personification of living and my perspective and how I treat others and how I allow people to treat me, and blah, 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 blah. Those are all these lenses that we grew up developing. And you're right. But at the end of the day, it becomes an opinion or your own perception of the world through your own lens. But the moment that it starts to affect other people, you can't call that factual. Fact is fact, perception is perception. And I think that's the biggest misconception when it comes to how our society has been dealing with things, because, which I really want to transition into this conversation with you, is, as you were documenting this process, to then having to edit everything, going through the footage, and like, were you did you feel the emotions that you felt while you were recording in the first place, being there presently in that moment? And then after the experience had left you and you were sitting down on your computer to go through all of this footage in order to edit and being able to piece them together, to be able to portray, you know, and from the pieces that I've seen, man, it was absolutely magnificent. Like it was just spectacular.
Well, the thing is that it's not, it's not, I'm being the director and like being in the middle of all this and then putting those pieces together that you saw, for example, when I watch it, you're very numb to it at that point. It's just that it's just almost like markers that you've lived through already, right? Going to film at like 10 o'clock and coming back early in the morning, or just on and on and on daily. That's the routine, right? Initially when I went, I didn't even know what I was doing with my life. Like I just didn't understand it, but I knew it was important. And cliques formed. The journalists on one end, you know, the left, the right, whatever, in all scenarios. But my thing was to stay away from any sort of cliques. I know one really good journalist in Portland, but other than that, I've not really, nothing against them, but I've not really tried to get into that group, right? We wanted to try and observe first. And when you truly observe, you get a sense of what's happening in a way that you don't normally see when you're tunnel visioning through something, right? We've been tackled by the feds. We've been shot at with rubber bullets. I was blind for 30 minutes at the Capitol building. All of these things are not things that have spurred any sort of like negativity towards anybody that's done anything to me. I've been punched a couple times in DC, and I've been rescued by Antifa when feds have, you know, tried to knock me on my ass. I've been, when I was blind for 30 minutes, it was the Trump supporters that were helping and guiding me through things, right? I'm a brown guy, right? So all of that comes through just observing and being objective about things. And that is, in this day and age, you have to be a little crazy to be in that stance to begin with, because it's, I don't know, man, it's a weird mentality. And it's not any credit to me. And that's another thing, actually. None of this I see with pride. I've lost so much doing this, you know. I've it's not about like I've been there, but I've done that. No, I've barely scraped away from it being just about human. The toxicity that you're around when you're in the front lines and one side is shouting to the other side, and the gas and everything. If you can just come away from that feeling a little human, then you're lucky. So that's how I feel.
I can feel the emotion through your voice. And even though 5 minutes ago you said that you're almost numb to it, reviewing, it seems like it's still taking its toll on you. And which isn't a bad thing. Again, you're human. And the fact that it is, you know, says to me that it was more than impactful in your life. And to me, it's like a whirlwind of emotions that you would have to experience in order to almost be subjective to this entire whirlwind of chaos it seemed like you were experiencing.
Well, I'm not numb to the toxicity that I faced, right? I absorbed through those events. I'm just numb to what one person does to another. And and that's where the difference is. When it comes to story, I'm not fazed by anything now. Uh, there's nothing that can faze me in terms of what I've seen. But when you're in the middle of it and you're just this sponge absorbing this toxicity, that is something that I'm still struggling with. And you know, you have good days and bad days, and I've woken up screaming at points, and I mean, that's what you do when you have a certain drive to find out, or when you have a certain drive to really discover what's out on the other side of the veil. And that's, you know, even that, like, I can equate all this to a cause, like for the greater good or whatever. Man, like, I'm in a place after this documentary where I see things for what it is. Like, since you asked earlier, like, I grew up in two islands, right? I grew up in one island that had a civil war for 20 years. And when I was a kid, I've seen, you know, when I was 4 years old, I see dead bodies floating on rivers. I've seen people hung on lampposts, dead. I have seen, at night, you could hear the rustling of leaves around our house as people with guns like walk around our house, like looking for one group or another, right? Like looking for communists or whatever. There was a communist uprising at one point. Anyway, the point is that, like, when it's so normal, when your childhood is so normal, where like dead body is not something that your parents will like try and take you aside and like explain, then that is there's a certain level of like, I don't know what it is. There's something that's ingrained in you that like gives you that need to figure out a better way forward, and it's in your blood. And on one end, it's my own selfish need, why I'm doing this, my need to find out through those scars that I have in my childhood, right? It's and being real like that is why I believe in myself that I can do this documentary. You know.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I I can relate to you on 5%. I grew up in a world where, you know, gunfire was the norm and bombs hitting buildings was just another day, which is why Beirut was known to be the place where everybody lived as if though it was their last day on earth, precisely for that reason. So I can sympathize slightly. I love the fact that you're trying to utilize those emotions and those childhood scars into almost like a creative outlet that could be the most spectacular work of art, in correlation though, and understanding that that work of art is based on the reality of which the world is as it was during that time, as it is today. Even, I mean, the complexity behind chaos and misjudgment and the news being a giant bold-faced lie to people's perception is, it's like the biggest conundrum that I could possibly think of. And I really hope, like, my thing is, I hope that people can come to this documentary and look at it from like almost unbiased lenses, right? They're coming to this thing and they're looking at it as is. I think that's the biggest thing that we as a society face today, which is we're coming, and again, going back to the lens thing, and I understand it humanizes you, but to have some sort of understanding that, like, just look at this as it is versus as the lens that you look through, right? It's like, I'm looking through it from Mo's lens, but I need to get out of Mo's lens, which is my lens, and I need to look at it from just a generic lens, because this is a world as it is today, yesterday, whatever, right?
And here's the thing, we always, say to ourselves, we're the good guys, right? We're the ones that are doing the right thing. I'm doing the right thing here. And those guys are wrong, right? And that's the thing. Like when you introspect deep enough, like they're all people on the left and the right, or whatever positions people take on the field here. They all have some sort of moral foundation to what they're doing, and at the same time, like that's just cut the crap, even when it comes to being politically correct these days. Like I get I can't even judge that, because I know the consequences of being politically correct these days and politically incorrect these days, right? Let me rephrase that. I know the consequences of being politically incorrect these days, but at the same time, when you look at the way the world was before this, like the last 10-15 years of what's been going on, and now people are a lot more sensitive, and I wouldn't be able to do this documentary if I was sensitive that way. I have to be real with myself. I have to tell myself the hard truths of who I am and what I have become through this documentary, and what my flaws are and how I can improve them, right? We always look outside. We don't look inside. If we were better people, if I am a better person now than I was yesterday, then that's the start. It's not about me making you a better person. It's about me being a better person, so that I can resonate with my inner calling in terms of what I want to do in the world, and then move forward with a conviction. It's not about glamorizing anything. It's not about saying, you know what, I'm a good man. Like that's, it's okay to be whatever it is. Like none of that matters. Like you sitting on the toilet in the morning is not the guy that comes out when you open the door. It's somebody else. You have to face the world, and you have to blend into the world in one way. The niceties and all this stuff, like this is real shit. People are divided left and right. How many people have died in the last 100 years that we could have possibly saved if people had a little more common sense and introspection? So, you know what? On my end, screw all this. I'm just doing this because it's my own struggle. It's my own scar, and I want to find people that have that same drive, and that's how I found the people I work with. Like Eric didn't join this project because we were on his side. He joined because he had that same urge that was beyond him. And there are people in this world like that are working for less, serving, volunteering at refugee camps around the world, or or on one end of the world or another. There are people that really just are selfless in a way to provide for your fellow human being, and that's the truth, right? Like that's reality. That's the reality that we need to strive for, where there's no more sensitivity has nothing to do with it. Insecurity has nothing to do with it. Like we can't be insecure and try to save the world at the same time. We just need to roll our sleeves up and just head to work. I think what I want people to take away from it is, I think what I want is for people to get a front seat within all that chaos. It's one thing to tell them this is how it is, and this is how it isn't, right? And just like you said earlier about coming to it with an open mind, I've gone beyond that at this point with this documentary. It doesn't matter who comes to watch this. It's spoon feeding some raw reality to people about how our fellow human beings act and behave, and how one reality and another reality are, and how the solution is not A or B. It's like 35 on the other side. Like, it's not a middle ground. It's just seeing reality for what it is. And I would would love to share some more clips with you that will like really make you understand things in a way that in a way how we're trying to do this. And I also want to say that, like, I agreed to do this podcast with you, and I wanted to do it, but at the same time, I don't even know if this is going to be content that you can use. So if you can't use it, that's totally fine too. And I apologize for using your time with this, but this is a this is a really, really deep. This is a really, really deep topic, and I want people to sacrifice something after they've seen this documentary to say, you know what, this is enough. We've seen something, and something needs to change. It's not about pointing to the other side and saying that's wrong or this is wrong. Look at the divide. I mean, look at the debates that we have. Look at the left and the right and whatever it is. Like, nobody is going to the other side to see why they think the way they do. It's just that you sit on your own pedestal and you point the finger at the other side. All I'm saying is, right and wrong may exist, but that doesn't move us forward as a human race. We need to figure out a solution, right? And where do we figure out this solution? And that is the real question I want people to wonder.
It's so prolific, and I think you made a valid point that it's hard for people to say, hey, I'm not going to point the finger. I want to know why you think the way that you think. Why is it that you have that perspective? And if we have this more, if we all lived more of like philosophical than we did, with these extremes, like these definite extremes, like I'm right and this is why I'm right. There's absolutely no reason or no understanding or no logic that can prove that I am wrong. And those extremes are what are causing this divide. And then, when if you want to call it manipulation, if you want to call it, perception, if you want to call it, a different viewpoint, whatever the case may be, ultimately, one thing is for certain, and that is we are divided, and we can't seem to grasp what the other side, what the other person is trying to convey, because we are so in our own heads that we believe we are right, and everything is just definite, and that makes things so complicated that how are you even to have like, I'll give you an example. You ever, what was that one? There's this one quote that's so true. I forget who said it, but don't ever argue with a stupid person, because the stupid person will win every time. They've had more practice. And I really believe that. I'm not saying, I'm not here to insult anybody, but the fact of the matter is, like, like if you get an argument with someone and all they're doing is trying to raise their voice to adhere and show dominance, right? Like that's right. Them being right. You have one of two options. A, you can get louder than that person, nothing gets resolved. Or B, you can walk away and still nothing gets resolved, because the person that you're having this argument with isn't in a position to want to listen or hear the other side. And I feel like that's what we're constantly seeing in our world is, one person shouting, the other person either trying to raise their voice or leave the room. Do you agree?
Yeah. And the thing is that, like, extremism is everywhere. I used to say this to my friend a long time ago. Like, extremism is not in the Middle East. It's everywhere you look. right? I mean, that's a or that is a stereotypical thing to say, right? Oh, back in 2000, well, when I came to college, but it's everywhere, and the thing is that there's a segment, I hope to have it in the final documentary, when it comes out, is when this girl is pleading with this uh cop, right? Come to our side, come to our side, like, what are you doing, man? I don't understand. And she's crying, she's in tears, and she's pleading with this cop. This cop is looking straight into her eyes, and he's one of the feds, so he came out of the city, right, when it was the peak of the protests in Portland, and you can see his face, and then it was so powerful to watch that inner exchange, and I could sense like the two sides taking either of their, like, I could sense people taking the girl side, and I can sense people taking the cop side, but at the end of the day, when I went home, and the next day when I went home, I got a message saying that one of those officers killed themselves at the Marriott,
Wow.
the very next day.
What did you find out if it was that same officer?
No. And so we didn't pursue the matter yet. But yeah, I mean, like that, like that's the kind of context that it puts. That's the kind of thing that, like, when I'm editing and you put everything together and you paint this picture for like, it's a 2-minute scene that went on for 10 minutes, and you paint it and you end it with that emotion where you can lead into the culmination of what happened, right? That's powerful. That's a human being. You know what I mean? Like, that's a human being that just came to Portland, hung himself. Like, how do you move on from that? Like, how do you just go back to home and get on with your life, 9 to 5 job, whatever it is. Like, it's not everybody's thing, and it's not supposed to be, but when you get all these scars moving halfway down, imagine you were like hacking and slashing through some thorns halfway through, and then you've got cuts right on your face and arm and legs. You can either turn back and come out and say, okay, I'm safe, or you can keep going until you get to the other side with more bruises and scars and blood and whatever. That's what I did, and that's the sacrifice that I've made. It's been self-sabotage in a lot of ways, in doing this documentary, right? So I just want it to be worth it, not in terms of the popularity or the fame or the money or whatever. I just want all of that to be worth something in the end, because it's personal enough to me. It's personal that I did this as a service, and someone better damn get the point. That's my wish, right? So yeah.
Well, I definitely think that someone will get the point. I think there's too many as many people as there are that are divided and are their own head. There's a lot of people that are introspective and want to see things as they are. I mean, which is why I'm so passionate behind this project personally, is when Eric first brought it to my attention and showed me a clip here and there, I I was so moved by it. I was moved by the fact that someone had the and I don't mean this in a negative sense, but the audacity to do this in such a raw, unfiltered way, and have the balls to put themselves in, in like the most dire situations, just so that they can capture the essence of what was happening as it was happening, raw and unfiltered, with no agenda and no point of view, right? Because that's what we face today, is that everything has some agenda, anything has some sort of point of view that tries to either repel a side or get a side to come and join them, whatever the case may be. But that's what's so fantastic and about what you guys have created here. And and at the end of it all, or at the end of the day, the thing is that humanity isn't lost, right? There are going to be people that are going to look at this and they're going to feel the pain and they're going to cry and they're going to rejoice at the same time, in the sense that there are good people out there. I'm not saying that people on either side are good or bad. I'm saying good in the sense that they can look at this and they can come to the realization that this is enough. Like that we have to do something. It's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's not about if you're left, right, Democrat, Republican. It doesn't matter what your skin color is, how you were born, your race, your ethnicity. Like, I'll tell you something, man. I was so fortunate to grow up in a world that never saw race or religion. And I was raised a Muslim, but I went to an all Christian school. And in my youth, I was so interested in religion that I spent time in different forms of religion, and from Christianity to Judaism to Buddhism to whatever, so on and so forth. I just found it so interesting. And so when I grew up, I started seeing like race being a real thing and racism being a real thing. And I'm like, I know this sounds so silly to say, like I'm thinking about it as I'm going to speak it, and it just sounds so silly, but like, this is literally how I think, which is I don't understand why the color of someone's skin dictates who they are as a person. Like, I think that's so profoundly fucked up. I just, it makes me laugh because it's so ridiculous, man.
No, isn't it funny? Like, it's funny that you say that, because that's where I'm at, right? Where race really isn't a thing for me. I'm never faced by it, ever. Like, someone says something derogatory or whatever, like I will laugh and move on in a way that is just, I don't know, like I'll just joke about it later, right? I remember someone calling me the N-word as I was driving bad, and my producer was in the car, and she said, I didn't tell you because if I told you, you would have like riled that guy up even more. Right? Because like, it's just funny to me. It's funny to me. It's not anything serious. And the thing is that, like, I think that racism is just one part of a whole long list of biases that mankind have, right? You can tell somebody not to be a racist. You can raise kids not to be racist, but they're gonna have all sorts of other biases that are gonna come up throughout their life. And it's not about really not being racist for me. It's about being empathetic, and it's about not having those biases in general that are those judgments in a way that are toxic towards other people, right? And that solves everything. It's just that people will compartmentalize one thing or another and say, oh, you're homophobic, oh, or you're racist, or you're this or that or the other. Like, that's always what happens. And then you're missing the point, man. Because you can be a gay rights activist and still be racist on the other end. Or I know people that have treated me horribly that are rooting for one cause or another, some sort of justice. It's really a result of like talking and running your mouth before taking a second to think and introspect and figure yourself out,
I agree. I couldn't agree more. Actually, I love the way you view the world, and your perspective on it, and like you're just making me want to watch this thing even like more. But when are you releasing it? Let's talk about that.
So I'm gonna say it right now, but I guess I've told Eric this, but not anybody else. We're planning on the 6th of January 2021.
Wait, say that again. You mean 2022?
2022. Yep. 6th of January 2022.
Wonderful. And it's just going to be able to be watched anywhere. Are you like specifically with a network or?
So our goal is to distribute it to a place where everybody can watch it. This deserves to be watched. It needs to make some sort of ripple. I don't know what an individual is going to get out of it, but I want it to be impactful in a way where something happens, right? Because these are things that people need to see. So my primary goal is to make sure that it is seen by as many people as possible. And, and then I'm going to go into hiding. I'll have had enough of it. I don't need to hear about the criticism or this or that, the other, but you know what? I've done my deal. I'm off.
I don't think you should go into hiding, my man.
That's what I keep telling Eric. Like yeah, but yeah. So,
are you thinking like a self-hosted website so that you don't have to be moderated by like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or any of the social networks?
No, I'd love to put it on HBO or HBO or Netflix would be great. I don't know, but somewhere where people actually have access to it. That's my main goal. It needs to be out there, and I think because of the kind of content we have, it's going to be fascinating.
Oh, I mean, it's very Netflix worthy. I mean, I would even, I would look at Netflix, Hulu, Prime,
and the stories, man. Like stories, what it's easy to like just riff-raff with you about this documentary, but like this amount of stories we have from the 25th of May all the way to the peak of the summer, to the 6th at the Capitol building, to when the George Floyd verdict was out. It's incredible. Like it's every time we think that we've got it, we've gotten our eyes open again, right? And that's the beauty of what this documentary, the process of this documentary, is that we didn't have this like corporate timeline where, okay, it needs to be done at this point and then we'll release it. We had the luxury of exploring it in a way where we didn't have a timetable, and that's all me. It's not easy dealing with me. I think kudos to Eric for really just letting me do my thing for as long as he's done it, and his, I have tremendous loyalty to him in terms of everything he's done and the patience he's had with me and the belief, because we all come from the same, like in our team, we all come from that same vein of like really wanting to figure out what we want to do to help, rather than to say, oh, this is a movie, let's get it out. And that process is not a quick one sometimes. And finally we've come down to a point where, we've got the content we need. And now we're trying to do some post in getting it all together. What we really need to harness in life are those things like your childhood traumas and things like that, where there's a selfish need to understand it and expose it. But through that, you get a real raw determination to do good. An example would be if you've had a bad childhood in terms of, not having a father or whatever, and now you're a father and you want to be the best father you can be, right? Yes, absolutely. That's your calling. Do it. Because that trauma as a child is going to make you the best father you ever know. And so it's always a balance of understanding something from your childhood or whatever trauma you faced within your life, and saying, you know what, this is why I want to do this thing, and serve the world in one way or another. It's not about like glamorizing it or saying, I'm a good guy and this is this and the other. No, it's about really introspecting and understanding the shit you went through and saying, I don't want anybody else to go through this shit again, right? Or to help other people understand it that are in your shoes. And if everybody has that drive in figuring out whatever small things that they have that can really push the world forward, then we'd be in a better place. But that again is intertwined with like, look at when we talked about like how extremism is everywhere, right? That's also a thing. People use that kind of trauma and they go overboard, right? So it's a fine balance. It's a balance in understanding it. You cannot just take some trauma and then convert it into this thing that you're just gung ho about without taking some room to breathe. I was an engineer coming into this country. I didn't get to be an artist, and this thing stewed inside me for so long before I said, screw it. And I got a job at a coffee shop for several months, and then I was a filmmaker since. But you gotta have that gentleness about it to really take time to understand things that make you, so that you can move forward into the world and make a real difference.
That's beautifully said. I almost want to end it there because it was so well said. But I do want to say, I think if more people were to think along those lines, I think we almost feel like wrong for being selfish. Because you were saying something about like let those, we're talking about ego and being selfish. Like for me, I understand that you can't be selfless unless you're selfish, and by that I mean you can't take care of other people unless you take care of yourself first, right? And and then the other thing is, like you were saying, like to really be gentle with understanding like who you are. Like you came into this world, you came into this country as an engineer. You decided to put that aside, get a job at a coffee shop, and start your journey of filmmaking. There's this old saying that when you make a plan, God laughs. And I think that has a lot of merit to understanding that like you can set your goals and you can have all these visions, and you can journal every day, and you can follow through with whatever it is that you want to be. And you may achieve those things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you were destined to be. That doesn't mean that that's what you were put on this earth to become and to share. And it's like, if you truly know yourself and you listen to that voice inside of you, like for you, it's that creativity that just had to be explored. And imagine if you didn't. There's a good chance that maybe this wouldn't have been the way that it should have been, or that it would have ever been in the first place. You know what I mean?
Right. And that level of like that selfishness. I just want to talk about I want to go back to the selfishness you were talking about. Really, selfishness itself, when we talk about it that way, it's really just accepting the fact that you're a human being, right? That acceptance goes a long way. Like I've sacrificed so much and I've lost so much doing this documentary. And personally, and I've been extremely selfish. And that's it. Like that's a consequence of my trauma. And knowing that and understanding that and being okay about the fact that you're not perfect and that you may be wrong. That's what really moves the world forward, right? I mean, like imagine people thought that way on the ground, on downtown as the protests were going on, like just checking a little bit and double checking to make sure like they're not going overboard. Or they're not just lashing out at one party or another in ways that are just inhuman. So yeah, I think connecting with yourself as that imperfect human being is the first step forward. Intellectualizing something is really just a cheap thrill in the moment,
Right.
Because maybe the wise will get it, right? But we don't really quite change from intellectualizing anything. You'll nod and you'll agree, and then we'll move on. And a week later, you don't even remember it. So the point of this documentary is to really just make people experience something, because it's really a revelation. Like we've had revelations through all this shit, right? Inhaling tear gas and getting infusions because we were, our blood was probably way too toxic, and just understanding things, not because of a debate, not because of something somebody said, but just experiencing it with your mouth shut, and coming to terms with how the world is, right? And that's why the documentary is called Revelations in Tear Gas. Really, Revelations in Tear Gas is all about just making a ripple in the pond.
Yeah.
And hoping that we can move a couple steps forward than just one step every 3 years. You know what I mean?
That's being generous. A couple steps, one step every 3 years is being very generous. I would say every decade at the very least is what it seems like it's been. But cool, man. Revelations in Tear Gas. This was great to be able to see your point of view, touched on a little bit of your story and how it's all kind of intertwined. And really, it seemed like this was meant to happen for you. It wasn't by accident.
That's why I felt like the film and I have so much in common, including the people that came on board onto the film after the fact. It's just runs in our blood, and that inquisitive nature, right? And so it's funny when you can relate a story in your childhood or in your real life into the film directly, and vice versa. About with a lot of these things, it's been an experience, and it's been eye-opening. Not just about the world, but about myself, right? And so that's what I'm really grateful for, I think, out of all of this.
I love it, man. Thank you so much for your time. This has been beautiful.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, and I hope this went well, and I hope you can use it. And if you can't, no hard feelings.
Oh no, I can. Absolutely. There's a lot to be taken from what you have said, what has been said here. My biggest takeaway is from listening to you is really knowing thyself and having the patience and the gentleness to be able to listen to that voice inside that maybe you're shutting out because you work at corporate America, or because your spouse or your parents are telling you that that's not something that you can pursue, or maybe because the way the society is set up that you feel whatever it is that is deep within you is the wrong thing. That's huge. That's huge for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people, and they can relate to that, and maybe that'll inspire some to listen to that inner voice.
Yeah, thank you, and you're welcome. And another thing is that it's also about not really papering over the cracks, right?
Yes.
Or telling yourself something that you're not, or lying to yourself so that you can move on to something else, or it's about really being honest with yourself. Not just being honest with yourself, but being okay being yourself. And I think that's that comes around full circle into you being a better human being and moving forward. So yeah.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it, man.
Go to habitsofthefew.com. Go to habitsofthefew.com.